Hello and welcome to today's webinar on Is Traceable the New Sustainable for Cosmetics, which is the first in a new series of roundtable webinars brought to you by Cosmetics Business to really zero in on the key issues affecting the cosmetics industry today. My name is Julia Ray. I am editor of Cosmetics Business and I will be your moderator for this session. It was important for us at Cosmetics Business when we put our heads together to ideate this webinar series that our first topic out of the gate would be something that was really relevant to the cosmetics industry and to as many players as possible across the cosmetics industry. And sustainability was a topic that just kept coming up time and time again. So given that this Saturday, the 22nd, marks Earth Day 2023, and that we are currently in the middle of Earth Week, it seemed auspicious to launch with a sustainability-related topic. So something I've increasingly noticed within my line of work is this growing skepticism surrounding the term sustainable itself. And beauty brands, conglomerates, and the supply chain are really using terms like traceable and transparent a lot instead. And also they're seeking to back these up with watertight stats to take their customers to other stakeholders along on their CSR journeys. So with this in mind, we wanted to ask, is traceable the new sustainable for cosmetics? And we are hugely fortunate to have assembled a real dream team to take you through this question this afternoon. Before I introduce you to our expert speakers, I have a few housekeeping details that I'd like to talk you through. Firstly, today's webinar will be available on demand if you'd like to revisit it or share it at any stage. The webinar will be split into a series of presentations from the companies on our panel before we roll over into a live Q&A with the presenters for you to ask them all of your burning questions on traceability, sustainability, and all the rest. If you have a question that you would like to ask our panel, then you can send this across to us using the box on the screen in front of you. It should add that all questions will be posed by myself to our panel, so don't be shy, it will be anonymous. Also, our tech team has reminded me to remind you that the console is interactive and that viewers can adjust the sizes of any of the engagement windows in front of them. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce our experts. First up, Rajesh Patel, Business Development Director at Actilis.
Hello, my name is Raj Patel, Business Development Director at Actilis. Today we will discuss traceability for our cosmetic portfolio and the topic of, is traceable the new sustainable for cosmetic? Before I begin on traceability, I want to tell you a little bit about Actilis. We have a hybrid model that delivers more choices and flexibility to our customers. Actilis is a leading manufacturer of critical raw materials and performance ingredients serving life sciences, specialty chemicals, and agri-science. We have an extensive network of manufacturing and R&D facilities, sourcing and sales offices located in over 10 countries worldwide. We are committed to continually expanding our manufacturing capabilities via organic growth and strategic acquisition. With more than 75 years of experience and more than 850 staff globally, and in-depth knowledge in every segment, we serve our customers. Our brand pillars are customer intimacy, customization, and consultative selling, as well as hybrid, providing more choices to our customers, and quality and reliability. Our sustainable strategy is based on supply chain, climate, and product. By 2023, we will map out the environmental impact of our core products and packaging portfolio and perform a life cycle assessment on our core product range, as well as define the reduction targets for emission sources and review the environmental practices of all key suppliers, and they must operate above an acceptable level of sustainability performance. Our partners are present globally. Aromtec, Technoble, Labio, Exargo, Elo, Barnett, and Bionet are our key partners for cosmetic and personal care ingredients. Barnett and Bionet are only present in Europe, while others are present globally. Whether working with the R&D, production, or answering buyers' need, we sustain creative inspiration, bring reliable solution to technical or regulatory questions. A thorough knowledge of the evolution of trends and regulation placed us in a key position to accompany the international development of innovative suppliers. We develop sourcing solutions aiming not only at securing our access to strategic ingredients, but also making sure they are produced sustainably with the highest guarantee of purity and traceability. Aromtech, they are present in Europe. They provide us with ingredients that are coming from Arctic wilderness. They extract actives via supercritical lipophilic extracts of berries. An environmental friendly process carried out at a low temperature, so with less energy consumption and no use of harsh chemicals and solvents. Close connection with their entire raw material supply chain, from berry cultivation to collectors to industry processors. They are able to trace their products from start. As also, they are certified for organic, ISO 9001, ISO 14001, and GMP. As you could see on the right-hand side, they practice circular economy, meaning minimal waste that uses the product coming out of food and feed material going to the other industries as well. Bionet, they provide us product from fertile lands of Mount Etna, standardized extracts of Mediterranean vegetable and fruit. From harvesting to the labeling, their raw materials are supplied and harvested within that specific region. Due to the short, traceable, and ethical chain and circular economy and scope of their actions, products are easily traceable and transparent. These products are only available in Europe. Also, as you could see in the bottom, the low carbon emission as well as environmental impacts are much lower than some of the other products that are available on the market. Technoble, they provide us products from Japan. Their products are from fruits and vegetable extracts and grown in Japan locally. They have two main lines of functional ingredients, iorganics and Rederma Earth. Iorganics products are GAS cultivation process. They care for the environment and tradition of cultivation method used by Japanese farmers. As far as Rederma Earth goes, products are based on renovation concept, that is reduce, reuse, and recycle. Exargo America brings us product from Mexico. This is a family-owned company since 2007, an integrated, sustainable, and eco-responsible industry. They have 80 hectares of proprietary organic aloe vera plantation that could produce up to 10,000 tons of leaves per year. A new production factory at the footprint of plantation, investment in industry tools and R&D, and a line of organic certified aloe vera juice and powders are available from Exargo. Determined to improve the environmental and social impact of its entire production and supply chain, their products are also certified for BioAgriCert, EcoCert, Cosmos, Fairtrade, Fairlife, and UEBT. They are a socially responsible company committed to their employees and local population. They protect the employees with tools that they provide for harvesting. For the employees, they have social protection, hygiene, security, and respect of the environment and biodiversity training as well. Also, they regularly provide education on good practices for organic farming, baskets of food and hygiene provide, financing of refurbishment of a chapel in a local area, and provide actions against fighting childhood obesity. Also, as I mentioned earlier, their products are exclusively organically certified. Revitalized land abandoned for, they're using revitalized land abandoned for several years, and cultivated areas where soil hydrology is suitable, meaning mountain runoff that supply shallow water. They also reuse some of the water coming from recycling. Also, once the water is repurified, it's continuously supplied in irrigation pond nearby. So this is the circularity and traceability for Exargo America. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisette Townsend from AAK. At AAK, we produce purely plant-based materials, and we supply various ingredients from these plant-based materials to the cosmetic industry. Today, we're talking about traceability and why traceability matters. Traceability does not in itself drive impact, but if we don't have traceability, we don't know anything about the people that are involved in the supply chains, the impact, good or bad, that the supply chain may have on the environment or on the people, how the crops are grown, how they're harvested, and if they're produced in line with certain local laws or match certain certifications. So we have to get involved to know anything about that. So traceability is the first step in sustainability. And without traceability, it's basically an unknown. At AAK, we work with a very structured approach to sustainability. And as you can see, the first step we take is that we try to understand our supply base. It's scheduled here at the very top, deeply understanding the supply base. Here we, with the help of external partners, understand what are the risks, what are the requirements, and so forth to a certain supply chain. And then we make a priority list, we take actions, we set our priorities, and we look at how we can mitigate the risks in the supply chain. We engage with the suppliers, with the farmers, often smallholders, and we engage to understand more, and then we can constantly revise our picture of what's the risks in the supply chain. And then sometimes as we drive a deeper and deeper engagement, we can also go to what we call driving impact beyond our supply base. That can be initiatives that goes beyond our own supply chain. And so it can be industry collaborations, across a certain region to drive even more impact. But let's look at some different types of supply chain and why traceability has been important for us in these supply chains, how it has given us insights. I brought different supply chains that are particularly important to our personal care portfolio: coconut, canola, and shea. Let's look at the different types of supply chains and what insights we've gained. In the coconut supply chain, coconut is one of the oils that's used widely in personal care. And here often brands in personal care area are claiming vegan. That's important because it's depicting that it's a green formulation. But if you don't know where your coconut oil is coming from, it can be hard to claim vegan, because in some regions, monkeys are used for the harvesting of the coconuts. So it's important even just for that, to know where your coconut is coming from. At AAK, we're currently working with 2 supply chains where we're working with traceability. It's a supply chain in the Philippines and one in Indonesia. Neither one of these regions use monkeys for harvesting. That's not part of the culture. As we engage, though, we get a deeper understanding of the culture, of the societal impact, of the environmental impact in this specific supply chain. It's still very early days for us, so we're still learning a lot. But what we are learning is that there are lots of risks that are cultural, custom, environmental related in coconut. One of the biggest problems we have right now is that the coconut trees are growing very old. The farmers haven't invested in replanting coconut trees, and they haven't done that for very specific reasons. They are not making enough money, and often they don't have land ownership, formal land ownership. So of course, why would they see this as a future income for their children? So why would they invest in planting trees? So these insights we only get because we have traceability. We know which farmers to talk to, and we can talk to them about what the risks are in the supply chain. And we can look at the trees with them and the customs. We then look across to a very, very different supply chain, canola. Canola is also widely used and is typically considered a very low risk supply chain because canola is grown in Europe, in Canada, in Australia, so not socially high risk environments. But for many companies and for consumers, CO2 emissions are important. We're starting to consider more what we consume and how it impacts the environment we have and the CO2 emissions. And likewise, for companies, we are enticed to lower our CO2 emissions, and we put programs in place for that. And for that very reason, it's very important to look at something like canola. But you can only look at that when you start looking deeper. So here, for the canola, we got very specific learnings that 80 to 95% of the CO2 emissions are in the scope 3, in the harvesting of the plant, the growing and the harvesting of the plant. So here it becomes very, very important to understand what kind of farming system is behind. And that's very country specific, often very regional. And what we found is that the Swedish farming system is incredibly efficient, very regulated and very efficient farming system, which means that the canola coming from Sweden is emitting only half of what is being emitted if you buy from other European countries. So quite an important learning if CO2 emissions is important to you. The other part is when we start engaging with the Swedish farmers, we can actually start using the rest of the waste that comes from the supply chain. So we've established a zero waste supply chain where the seeds we take in from the Swedish farmers, we press it, we get the oil out we need. Then there's a cake left that can be used as a biogas sauce. And then there's the stalks left, which can be used as soil improvement, so fertilization. And there's also some proteins left, which can be used for feeding cows, for example. And many Swedish farmers that grow canola also have cows. So you can see here a nice full circle and a zero waste supply chain. Then we have another type of supply chain, which was the shea. And shea, as you may know, is very important to AAK. We have a long history of supplying shea butter and shea derivatives to the personal care industry. We have a very long-standing direct supply chain where we're sourcing directly from women in West Africa, over 300,000 women. So a massive supply chain, which secures that we have traceability to the individual woman. We know what we buy from each she-collecting woman. This ensures that we have a very deep engagement with the women. We have a deep understanding of the supply chain. In AAK, we have over 130 extension officers that are working with the villages, with the women directly. These extension officers are hired from the local societies, so they have a deep understanding of the culture, of the societies, of the risks, of the gender issues, and so forth. And here you see one of my colleagues out working with one of the women's groups. So through traceability, through direct trade, we gain these deep insights, and we can link the women directly to the market. We can start working on the customs. One of the big customs in shea is that you boil shea kernels over open fire, which you can imagine emits a lot of CO2. It means a lot of smoke for the women, smoke inhalation, and also burns. And here you see a woman who's working on an improved cook stove, and this is part of the trainings we do, but also part of us working kind of beyond our supply chain, taking initiatives that goes beyond that. If you remember the slide in the beginning with the different initiatives on different levels. When you have a program like this, which has been running more than 10 years, and with a local workforce, you build trust over time. And speaking of trust, most of the women, they've never set foot in a bank. And of course, to pay out the bonuses, to pay out the payment for the kernels, we work through the bank system. So we also work with the women on understanding how the bank system works, to set up accounts and so forth. So really a trusting relationship where we work on many different levels. And this is due to direct trade and traceability. At AAK, we work with a lot of different supply chains, and we work deeply engaged in these supply chains. And traceability is absolutely the starting point for us for working on that. But traceability doesn't drive impact. You have to drive impact after securing traceability, knowing where the crops are coming from, and start assessing the risk, prioritizing what are you going to address, and then start engaging to transform. So traceability doesn't do it alone, but it's a very important starting point. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barb Paldus, and I'm the CEO of Codex Labs. And today we're going to be talking about the traceability of sustainability through carbon footprint. What is sustainability? Sustainability means different things to different people. It can be managing our ecosystem, building a more equitable society, managing biodiversity, addressing the questions around human population growth, and other things. Today, we will focus specifically on carbon footprint, the emissions and the energy usage in making our products, transporting our products, and using our products. And I will point out that consumer behavior in a full life cycle analysis has to be included. For those of you who aren't sure what carbon footprint is, it is the total greenhouse gas emissions of anything, whether that's a person, a company, a product, that are expressed in units of grams of CO2 equivalent, so GCO2e. It cannot be calculated exactly because we don't know exactly how much gas it takes to transport certain things. They may be mixed in with other goods from other vendors. It may depend on the climate of how long people were picking because it was hot, so they weren't picking as long. But regardless, we can actually create fairly good estimates, and that gives us the trends that we need to monitor to minimize our footprint. Why? Well, globally, we emit over 36 billion tons of CO2 per year. A lot of it is embedded in our traded goods, and you may be wondering, well, why does this matter? Well, if we look at the levels of CO2 in our atmosphere, they have risen over 50% since the beginning of the industrial age and over 13.5% since only 2000. So that's in the last 23 years. In 2021 and 2022, we saw peaks over 420 parts per million. And with COVID, if you're thinking, well, it's not that hard to get rid of the CO2, when half of the population was locked down and nobody was moving around or driving cars, our emissions only fell by 6%. So what that basically tells us is it will be very difficult to get to net zero. So how is a product carbon emission put together? Well, if we look at the life cycle analysis, we start with the raw materials, and those are about a quarter of the carbon footprint. The actual manufacturing, distribution, and retail are actually less than 10%. The rest is consumer behavior. So as part of this analysis that we look at today, we're going to see how we can educate our customers. The first topic we're going to talk about is an example of raw materials. We're going to talk about sugarcane ethanol. So this is essentially ethanol that is produced from sugarcane. Part of that sugarcane goes to make sugar, which is used by the food industry, and the other part of that ethanol is used to make a plastic called polyethylene. Polyethylene is in fact a recyclable plastic, especially if it's the high density polyethylene. You may be wondering why this matters. Well, glass and aluminum, even though they claim to be 100% recyclable, actually have an enormous carbon footprint to manufacture. And things like aluminum actually are a finite supply. Whereas from a renewable plant that we can replant and replant and replant again, we can get a renewable source of plastic. That plant, as it grows, will suck CO2 out of the atmosphere so that the net carbon footprint of that material is actually more negative than its equivalent mass of material produced from a petrochemical, which is also a finite resource. Is it the same? Yes, it is chemically identical. It can be recycled identically, but you may be saying, yeah, but what about the agricultural impact? Because now we're using farmland, we're cutting down the Amazon rainforest, for example, we're killing animals and trees. Well, if it's a very, very efficient manufacturing. If you look at the scalability, about 3 tons of this green polyethylene can be made from the equivalent of about 2 US football fields. Out of those 3 tons, you can make roughly 400,000 50 milliliter tubes, which is your typical product size for a moisturizer in the beauty industry. So that's actually a very, very efficient use of land. On top of that, if you look at the full life cycle assessment, now from the raw material being transported to make the actual tube itself, then a large tube, for example, something that we'd find a cleanser in, has a very negative carbon footprint and more than offsets for almost twice of its polyethylene equivalent. Smaller tubes are more equivalent in terms of 1-to-1, except that they're a negative carbon footprint. Well, where does the consumer behavior come in? The depressing part to me about all of this is that if you drive a mile to the store to buy your products in a car, you will basically consume more than any of these tubes, and you would actually have to buy about 10 tubes to offset 1 mile of driving. We can also take a look at how important consumer behavior is here in terms of purchasing. And here again, I would urge you, if you look at anything that is flown short term versus put on a train or put on a boat, something that isn't locally sourced, try to walk to your store, try to take public transportation to your store, and try to buy as many things together to minimize the number of times you actually go to the store, because consumer travel and product shipping can actually wipe out all of these savings. Furthermore, if you're looking at luxury goods, there are some obvious things you can do. Don't buy products packaged in cellophane with stickers that are bright colors or bright metallic colors. Those are incredibly difficult to recycle. Look instead for things that are monomaterials, recyclable, refillable, and water-free, because transporting large amounts of water around the world in a product, say if it's 70% water, means that you're wasting that carbon footprint on the water. We'll look at another example of a zero-waste product, and so I will go and harp on soaps. Specifically cold process soaps, because they don't require heat. They are made in reusable wooden molds. They can be packaged in compostable paper-based boxes. You can recycle any of the cutoffs from beveling the edges to make pretty colored soap, so you don't even waste your soap disposal. And you can also upcycle plant materials as exfoliators, which again prevents food waste from going into the landfill. Now, why am I harping on soap? Because the use of liquid soap, which is packaged in plastics, has increased our plastic utilization by a factor of over 1,000 in the last 100 years. Why is that? When the GIs came home from World War II, because of hygiene and preventing disease in the barracks, they got into a daily routine of washing, shaving, and toothbrushing. And then companies like Lever Corporation, like Unilever, started posting ads about body odor and washing every day. And by the 1950s, house construction had changed and people no longer use bathtubs, but they use showers, and soap became goopy. And so they wanted liquid soap because they could keep it nice and neat in a plastic bottle. Well, where did that leave us? In 2009, the Swiss University ETH did a study, and they looked at the carbon footprint, not with the full life cycle, but just of the manufacturing process and the delivery process of liquid versus a solid soap, and they found a ratio about 4:1. Because if you don't have to have heat in the process, like in making liquid soap, you save energy. It takes a lot less energy to transport solid soap because it doesn't contain a lot of water. And you don't have the plastic content at the end of it that needs to be recycled. In addition to that, if you look at pumps that are on all of our liquid soap, they're very generous because that way we use the liquid soap up and have to go buy a new one, which is great for business, but not so great for the environment. We redid the calculation in 2021, and we were very proud that with our zero waste cold process soaps, we could improve that ratio to 13.4:1. But the practical reality as we did the full life cycle analysis, including consumer utilization, is that heating water and using hot water for more than 3 minutes in the shower, well, still significantly impacts the amount of carbon dioxide emitted. But for a more than 3-minute shower, that impact became significant. Now, what about in the US? Well, our average shower is actually 8 minutes, and we use about 16 gallons of water every time we take a shower. That means for about the 62 billion showers we take every year, of which about 2/3 use liquid soap, that's an extra carbon footprint of about 1.7 million tons. Now, compared to the 6,000 million tons of CO2 we emit as a nation, you might be saying, well, why does that really matter? Because every little bit counts. And basically, because a lot of places in the United States are worried about running out of water, like the Colorado River, for example, if we actually took shorter showers, we could save 600 billion gallons of water. Now, that may not be carbon footprint, but that is still affecting us as a population. So what have we learned today? Sustainability is a journey, and we really need to account for the customer behavior and create products that minimize the customer behavior utilization of energy and emission of footprint. We need to create things that minimize waste, that are recyclable, and we also need to start looking and talking about biodiversity. Why? For example, in our microbiomes, with all the antibiotic use we have throughout various food industries and other industries, we basically are killing off our own microbiome, in addition to killing off plant and animal species at a ferocious rate. We're also losing indigenous knowledge of how to use those plants and species and live a more sustainable existence. And so ultimately, we're destroying the genetic heritage of this planet. So I'll leave you with a quote that without biodiversity, there is no future for humanity, from Dr. MacDonald at Oxford University. And I would encourage you to watch the latest David Attenborough movie about deforestation and the explosion of basically agriculture and agricultural land because of the population explosion, and then rethink your own behavior. How can I use less energy? How can I buy more efficiently and reduce my carbon footprint? Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Cosmetic Business, for this opportunity to participate to this very important topic around sustainable sourcing. In my presentation, I'm going to address questions around strategies to scale up for sustainable and sensible beauty. First, I would like to define what I mean by sensible beauty versus clean beauty or green beauty. The sensible beauty movement, sometimes called conscious movement, helps address concerns around product safety, quantifiable environmental and human impact, while making sure that consumers get the right value and performance out of their formulation. Sensible beauty go way beyond green or clean beauty by adding more societal dimensions to the notion of sustainability and aiming for more quantifiable impact. But there is a stronger emphasis on supporting communities, establishing trust and transparency across supply chains, and this can become very challenging for smaller and even larger brands. As clean and sensible beauty gain in popularity, we can see a fast growth for products that are based on naturally derived ingredients such as botanicals, natural oils, and so on. When we look at the growth rate of products featuring such ingredients compared to the growth of the overall BPC category over the past 5 years, we can definitely see that the growth of botanical-based products far outpaces the growth of the overall BPC category. So that's great, right? That means formulators are adapting and formulations are more and more natural. And when you look at the amount of certification and ethical claims, which I don't show here, you can see a similar growing trend. But what does that mean for your supply chain? Because switching from synthetic, broadly available ingredients with fixed specifications to naturally derived ingredients, it's not always very straightforward. You don't have a reactor spitting up a steady streams of botanicals. They need to grow, be harvested, extracted, refined. Specifications can vary widely from one region to another, from 1 year to another. And of course, things can become worse very rapidly, right? Especially because climate change will represent a growing barrier to the transition of the beauty industry toward a more sustainable model. It potentially brings a whole slew of challenges to farmers and the downstream industries that depend on them. Actually, a recent study from Cornell estimates that climate change has reduced the global farming productivity by 21% compared to what it could have been. The effect is only expected to get worse in the future because, contrary to synthetic ingredients, natural ingredients availability is directly connected to weather, conditions, and quality of the harvest, among additional factors. So when we think of climate change, we think of the recent historical heat waves recorded in the USA or India. We think of the tremendous snow seasons we have had on the West Coast. But it's not all about the heat or the cold. In 2018, unusually heavy rain caused massive flooding across the US Midwest, leaving some areas 10 feet deep in sand. So as a result of these floods, many farmers had to delay spring planting, which can lead to significant supply chain disruption for the food and personal care industry, which continues to rely more and more on naturally derived ingredients. So for those who prefer dollar amount to quantify the impact of climate change, it has cost $27 billion in the US alone. So as the industry shifts to raw materials that are increasingly derived from natural feedstock, it also becomes more and more exposed to the risk that climate change represents to crops and harvests. The increased reliance on naturally derived ingredients creates a strong impetus for manufacturers to protect their supply chain. Increasing safety stock is an immediate potential solution, but beyond the cost implication, it is not always possible to do so, mostly because natural ingredients tend to have a shorter shelf life than their synthetic counterparts. Using alternative sources can also come as a possibility, but this strategy exponentially increases operational complexity. First, you need to identify new sources and making sure that they fit with your brand's philosophy or policies. Then specifications need to be aligned, as well as certifications, especially if they are part of your brand's value proposition, right? Lastly, traceability can increasingly become an issue, especially if you have made specific regional claims about the origin of the hero ingredient, for instance. As a matter of fact, traceability can become extremely complex in our industry because not all suppliers offer vertical integration for their products. Actually, it's pretty rare. In a traditionally diversified sourcing model that you can see here on the left, even when using several suppliers for the same ingredients, there are no certainty that the raw material comes from different sources. So adding many suppliers can add complexity while adding only a sense of security if all the sources of the raw material are the same. Another model that can be developed by suppliers is the upstream dual sourcing model. In the model, the complexity of dual sourcing is outsourced to the supplier and doesn't fall on the manufacturer's lap. This model is extremely efficient for beauty manufacturers that handle only one reference, but still enjoy the security of having their ingredient coming from two separate sources, which in turn provide increased supply security. So let's look at a concrete example with jojoba. So as a preface, I would say that jojoba is a very interesting plant that has found its way into many personal care applications. It is native from the Sonoran Desert in the USA, This plant can actually sustain a very harsh and dry environment thanks to the oil it produces, and that helps keep moisture inside the plant. The specific oil has very unique properties compared to traditional triglyceride oils, which contributes to the benefits of jojoba oil in skin and hair care application. And actually, Vantage has conducted the most comprehensive set of clinical studies to substantiate these benefits, and this explains why jojoba is found in many beauty formulations. While its original environment is in North America, the plant can also grow in other similar climates, like in the Monte Desert in Argentina, for instance, which opens up a lot of interesting possibility to dual source this ingredient from different regions in order to reduce the risk posed by climate change. So to protect our customers from significant shortages due to erratic weather pattern or bad harvest, Vantage has adopted a vertical integration model with geo-diversified sourcing. The company operates farms in Arizona and in Argentina. These two regions are separate enough that it's very unlikely for them to be impacted simultaneously by bad weather. The security of the supply is further guaranteed by safety stock of both the oil and the seed, which can be kept longer than the refined oil. And because every step of the transformation chain is internalized, it becomes easier to align specification, certification, and for beauty manufacturers to assess the company health, safety, and environmental policies. As part of our commitment to always improve on our sustainable practices, we recently certified the oil out of our Arizona farm Fair for Life in order to address the growing demand from consumers. So beyond the notions of supply security, this structure allows Vantage to offer manufacturers an ingredient that checks a lot of boxes on the sensible beauty list. We make sure all employees at our farms and facility work in safe conditions and receive the adequate training that allows them to grow as professionals. We also exceed local labor laws, which mean that workers are fairly compensated and work in a sustainable manner. We work with independent organizations to adopt a coherent and pragmatic approach to social and environmental stewardship. I already mentioned how full integration helps you be transparent with your customers when it comes to traceability and origin. And this integration and geodiversification also contributes to our resilience. Finally, we want to support our customers by also bringing more awareness to consumers about sustainable practices and benefits of jojoba. That's why we continuously work with independent magazines and influencers to spread information. And finally, all these efforts go way beyond simply jojoba oil. Vantage leverages its chemical transformation expertise to create a comprehensive range of jojoba derivatives, from esters emollients to exfoliants, film formers, or encapsulated beads. Most of these ingredients are made using green chemistry principles and are compliant with Cosmos certifications, but the variety of formats, performance, properties mean that you can leverage the benefits of jojoba in pretty much all types of beauty and personal care formulations to meet the latest trends like sensible beauty, clean beauty, blue beauty, solid formulations, vegan beauty, and so on. So now I've added a last checkbox to our pyramid of needs. Sensible beauty can only grow if it is supported by robust and resilient processes that will allow brands to sustainably thrive and live up to their customers' expectations. With the example of jojoba, I wanted to show how choosing the right supplier needs to be a very sensible choice from the leadership team to make sure that you are partnering up with the right companies for your brand. So thank you. That's it for my part. If you want more information, please visit our comprehensive website or follow us on LinkedIn to get news, updates, and connect with Vantage in person at trade shows and access thought leadership content. Thank you.
I am Hannah. I'm Sustainable Sourcing Manager for Cosmetics at the Fairtrade Foundation. I'm based in the UK, and I'm happy to talk to you today about what traceability means for Fairtrade Cosmetics. So for those of you who don't know Fairtrade already, just a brief introduction. We are a certification scheme and a global movement with a vision of the world in which all producers can enjoy secure and sustainable livelihoods. We work with around 1.9 million farmers and workers worldwide. There are more than 6,000 Fairtrade products, including cosmetics products that you may not have known existed, including things like body butter, cleanser, hand cream, bath oil, lipstick, decongestant balm, hair butter, and even more. Fairtrade is the world's most well-known and well-trusted sustainability mark. So around 90% of people in the UK consistently say that they've seen the Fairtrade mark, and Fairtrade is a household name. We're partnered with most major UK retailers, as well as many global brands and retailers, and a rising number of fashion and beauty brands. So traceability is an important key principle of the Fairtrade system, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But first, I'll just touch on some of the other key principles because really they all work together as part of an interconnected system. So the standards are a really important part of the Fairtrade system. The Fairtrade standards are very transparent. They're available on our website. You can go online and find them and read them right now. The standards are a list of requirements that all our partners must fulfill and they're audited against in order to be Fairtrade certified. And the standards cover planet, people, and prosperity. So they don't just cover social factors, they also cover environmental factors and other factors as well. Other important elements of the Fairtrade system are the minimum price and premium. So the minimum price acts as a safety net for producers when the market prices crash, and the Fairtrade premium is an additional sum of money that producers receive on top of the minimum price, and they decide how to spend that money themselves. This links to these other two really important key principles down below of democracy and co-governance, and also generally these really intrinsic important elements of Fairtrade that are about amplifying producer voice and producer agency. So in terms of democracy, producer cooperatives democratically vote on decisions on premium spend, and intrinsically the Fairtrade system is all about co-governance. It's 50% co-governed by producers themselves. Another final important principle to touch on is our work in advocacy and awareness raising. So we are constantly collaboratively pushing for visibility, reaching public and policy agenda. So of course, one of the reasons we're here today is to talk about cosmetics, and we're working more in cosmetics now because we're seeing these really interesting trends. For example, data shows that 95% of shoppers say there's a need for more honesty and transparency from cosmetics brands on their product ingredients. Also, in terms of online trends, online searches for natural ingredients makeup are rising exponentially year on year. We think that's really well aligned with the Fairtrade brand because consumers so closely associate the Fairtrade mark with natural ingredients, whether that's coffee, cocoa, bananas, and so on. And also, even though we've not been in this space as long as we have been in cocoa and chocolate, for example, in cosmetics, we're already finding data that shows around 60% of consumers say they prefer to buy a Fairtrade labeled beauty and wellness product over a non-labeled one. So just to briefly touch on some of the work that we're doing in cosmetics at the moment, there are currently a range of different cosmetics ingredients that can be Fairtrade certified, including cocoa butter, coconut oil, olive oil, and particular shea butter. So we are highlighting shea butter at the moment because it's such a special and unique and important ingredient. That's for a range of reasons, including some really important environmental sustainability factors because it's wild harvested, and also including some really important social factors because it's most often harvested by women across the African shea belt. So some really, really important and special stories to be told there. We currently work with some major cosmetics brands as well as a number of exciting influencer brands, and we're seeing the Fairtrade sales of shea butter cosmetics are growing exponentially, more than doubling year on year from 2021 to 22. And we're seeing some really exciting media interest in Fairtrade cosmetics as well. So to talk about the main topic of the day, traceability. What does traceability mean for Fairtrade? Well, we believe that traceability standards, certification and fair pricing are critical first steps in securing sustainable supply chains. Traceability is also important for building trust with consumers because it demonstrates commitments to measure and act. And obviously for Fairtrade, building trust is particularly important. And as we said, the Fairtrade mark is trusted by around 80% of people. For traceability to be a useful part of your sustainability strategy, it needs to contain reliable and robust information. Certification is mandatory for every producer and company involved in the supply of a Fairtrade product. So that means that every farmer, trader, processor, manufacturer must be certified from the very start of the chain right through to the very end of the chain in order for that product to have the Fairtrade mark. This process creates transparency and traceability. And as you can see here, traceability is very clearly written into the Fairtrade standards, and the standards are what organisations are audited on, and that audit covers environmental, social and economic factors as well as the traceability. The majority of Fairtrade products are fully traceable, meaning they are kept separate from non-Fairtrade products from the field all the way to the fair trade labeled product on the store shelf. But there are some products where this is more difficult to achieve, and so that can actually be detrimental to farmers, and so we use a process called mass balance instead. However, for the majority of cosmetics products, including shea butter, as I touched on earlier, physical traceability is the method that is used for traceability. Fair trade, there are only 4 products that don't use the physical segregation traceability system, and those 4 products are cocoa, tea, sugar, and fruit juices. And that's because for those particular products, it's extremely difficult to ensure the physical traceability system because they are routinely mixed or they go through really complex manufacturing processes. And so instead, the mass balance system is used, which uses a calculation to ensure that the amount of outputs sold as fair trade are equivalent to the amount of inputs sourced as fair trade, and so uses a calculation system to ensure traceability in a similar way. So as you can see, as I mentioned, really robust data is important for a good traceability system. Fair trade certification incorporates multiple sources of data into our traceability system. That includes premium use data that shows progress against sustainable development goals. It includes audit data that ensures the minimum social, economic, and environmental standards are met, and it captures key risk areas. It also includes regular annual producer surveys, which captures important demographic details from the producers that we work with. And it also includes the fair trade verification, which has a kind of virtual handshake process, which tracks volumes through a system enabling verification of sales on fair trade terms, enabling robust and accurate claims to be made. For any traceability system to be considered really trustworthy, watertight, and robust, it needs to have solid accountability behind it. And so the way that we assure accountability at fair trade is through a number of ways, predominantly through FlowCert, which is our third-party external certifier. So we are very much held to account by FlowCert. We are completely separate organizations. You'll find they have a separate website, separate branding, and FlowCert is the organization that audits our partners against the fair trade standards. There's an added layer of accountability because FlowCert itself is actually accredited, ISO accredited. It's a member of ISO and CDEX networks that again kind of hold FlowCert and fair trade to account. And FlowCert is regularly audited itself by the German National Accreditation Body. So all in all, together, that already adds a really strong layer of accountability. There are also several other ways that we are held to account. For example, intrinsically, the fair trade system, we're not just one body, we're actually a constellation of several different organizations. So I'm from Fair Trade in the UK, there's Fair Trade France, Fair Trade Africa, Fair Trade Germany. We're always holding each other to account. Also, we're a member of various other groups and coalitions and partnerships. We really believe in partnerships because through partnerships, again, you're able to hold one another to account. Whether it's the ICL Alliance or the Global Living Wage Coalition, that's something that we really believe strengthens accountability. So just to sum up, there are a number of ways and tools that we believe mean that transparency and traceability are important ways to ensure resilient supply chains. And particularly for us at the moment, we're focusing on digital tools and digital innovation, and there are a range of ways we're doing that, and both Fair Trade and FlowCert have a number of digital tools that are constantly being improved, including things like risk mapping, which uses digital tools, as well as consultation and all kinds of research methods to ensure that we have a solid understanding of the risks throughout the supply chains that we're working in. And we're finding that that also means that we're a really strong HRADD partner for our commercial partners, so we're able to support them in navigating the challenges that are coming from changing legislation. So to sum up, I hope that you agree with me and also think that traceability is a really important tool in the toolkit of your sustainability solution. Just one tool, of course, in amongst others that often work together in an interconnected way. At the end of the day, we are working towards an end goal that I mentioned earlier, and that is to drive our vision of the world in which all producers can enjoy sustainable livelihoods. And so I will leave you with this quote from one of the entrepreneurs that we work with, Aisha, who's a shea butter entrepreneur. It's in her words, so please do pause it and read it for yourself. And thank you so much for your time.
Hello all and welcome to our live Q&A. I'm thrilled to welcome our presenters in person, and a huge thank you to everyone for your insights into all the company's respective sustainability efforts there. there is certainly a lot of good going on, which is great to see. We've had some excellent questions in, both before this webinar and as part of the sign-up process too. And of course, just now while everyone's been speaking, so do keep sending these in. So I am going to extend this Q&A, with your permission, guys, to 1/4 because I know that everyone loves an expert debate. But first, I have my own question. I'd like to dive into the theme of this roundtable by asking, how do we define traceable, and how does this differ from sustainable? So, Sebastian from Vantage, can I pick on you for our first answer?
Sure. Thank you. The way I see the difference between the two, for me, traceable is really a tool that will allow brands to achieve true sustainability, right? Because with traceability, you really understand if the product you're getting, you understand not only the origin, but you're supposed to understand all other associated parameter or certification that comes with this product. You understand how it is made, how it is harvested. You understand the certification. You understand in what condition this ingredient or material is being sold to you. And you will need that if you really want to make sure that you are hitting all the criteria that are required and aligned with your sustainability goal. So in order to do one, you will need really the other, and traceability is, that's why traceability is becoming increasingly important, because sustainability without traceability, basically, it quickly could amount to greenwashing, basically.
Fantastic. So it's intrinsically linked. Would you other guys agree there? Is there maybe differing views, or would you back up what Sebastian's saying?
Completely agree that it is the necessary first step to know what people, what environment is impacted, and for you to evaluate what risks to start approaching and to drive sustainable impact. So completely agree with Sebastian.
Yeah, I agree as well. You have to quantify things. If you don't quantify things, you have no idea where you are. And as he said, that can lead to the slippery slope of greenwashing.
Yeah, that's the thing that we all want to avoid, certainly. So we had some good but similar questions in, so I've amalgamated these. But how do we certify traceability? And is there a specific tool that can help with traceability throughout the supply chain, or is it more of a manual effort? Maybe Hannah, can you give us the fair trade perspective there?
Yes, absolutely. So I feel it might be a little bit cheeky for me to take this question because, of course, my answer is that fair trade is a tool to certify traceability. But I think generally, certification generally is a great tool to do it, because, to use that phrase that's overused, why reinvent the wheel when certification systems are doing this and putting a lot of resource and effort collaboratively, globally into setting up these tools. We have a tool called Fairtrace, or FlowCert does our auditor, which is a digital tool, and we're constantly working to innovate that digitization. And so by kind of joining forces, we really believe in partnerships and collaboratively joining voices together, and joining resources together so that we can do that as one, rather than all manually kind of doing lots of our own manual systems.
Fantastic. And, how do all you other guys trace your supply chain? Do you have any particular tools that you have as your preference there?
I can add something here.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It all depends on the supply chain, right? It depends on what's practical to work with in the field. If you're working in the sheet belt, you can imagine it's very difficult to have internet coverage. So there, the records are kept first manually and then entered in the evening when our extension officers come home and have computers, have connection. And then in other areas is completely different tools. One of the tools we're piloting right now in our coconut supply chain is a geochemical tracker. So where you're basically looking at the final oil and looking for markers that can indicate which region is it coming from. And of course, that's a very, very efficient tool if you're in supply chains where there can be influx, and so where it can be more difficult to determine that what you're buying is coming from a specific region, which you want to when you are selling traceable materials. So it all depends, but it is interesting to follow these new tools.
Fantastic. And Barbara, I think you were about to say something then as well.
So we work with the Carbon Footprint Society it's similar to Fair Trade, but specialized in carbon footprint. They're experts in doing the calculations, but oftentimes we find that suppliers or vendors don't even know their own carbon footprint. So if we're looking at an ingredient that we're buying and they're trying to understand, we understand very clearly the calculation of the carbon footprint of shipping it to our manufacturing facility, but say it's something that's been picked over in the Ukraine or in Ireland, the supplier then often has to go back and provide that last mile of that traceability, and that's where we're finding the challenge. 4 years ago, we thought blockchain would solve everything. I would say we're not there yet, but we're hopeful that as these tools mature, we'll be able to go all the way back to the actual source of the plant raw material. And some companies do definitely provide all that information, but I would say about 70% of the time right now, we're still guessing.
It is interesting that you mentioned blockchain, because we just had a question through saying, do you think blockchain could be part of the solution on traceability? So what's everyone's thoughts on that? You've mentioned there that it's part of the way, but maybe not all the way. Is there a general consensus about blockchain as part of the future?
If I can add here, we have a bit of experience with blockchain. We did a project with blockchain. It was more for communication towards consumers, and it was where you could scan a QR code on the back of a pack and basically see where the ingredient was coming from. It's relying on the data that we're putting in our system, so it's just pulling out data that's already there. So it all depends on what's the data behind it, right? And this data, this reports on traceability can be, blockchain can gather and kind of connect the dots, but it can also be certified, like Hannah is saying, fair trade, or it can be verified by third party or audited by consumer or customers, sorry. So not necessarily the future answer for that. It is just a tool to connect the data that's there available.
Thank you for that explanation there. Rajesh, I have one for you potentially as well, which is, it was sent in while you were giving a presentation, hence why I'm picking on you. But we have somebody here wondering, can you share how you're tracing more than just the origin of your ingredients? How are you tracing the testing of the ingredient to ensure that it is truly pure and safe? Oh. Hello? Rajesh? Hi. Oh, you might be on mute, Rajesh. Okay, well, for the moment, what we will do is I will move on to the next question, and I will let you get back to that, absolutely. So we have one here. What is the difference between traceability and transparency, and is it more relevant to look at it at the ingredient or the company level? That's a great question. Barbara, maybe we can trouble you for that one.
So looking at it at the ingredient or the company level, we have found, for example, with clays, that the company will be completely unaware of testing for heavy metals. And some of these are larger suppliers, and their answer to us will be, well, no one's requested this before. And so then we end up having to essentially take care of all of the testing so that we can then get other types of certification. So for example, we also look at EWG verification for safety. They look at the heavy metal content not to exceed. And so oftentimes, even though they're sourced within Europe, these clays have never been tested. And so we've had to reject suppliers on that basis. That, of course, leads to a very difficult conversation. Then we need to know, where are they drawing these materials from? They claim that they don't have a problem. They look at the data. Data usually is what resolves the discussion. And in some cases, they come back with a different location, with a different sample that has to be retested. But I would say trust but verify is definitely a philosophy that we work on. There are other ingredients, for example, like pyrrolizidine and comfrey, that if you're not looking at a biotech source where you can genetically modify the plant cell to not produce that compound, which is a toxic, you definitely have to screen no matter where it's sourced from, which country of origin. And we usually test not just the raw ingredient, but the macerated or the oil-infused ingredient as well. In cases like seaweeds, for example, where we have our whole supply chain now for extraction, we have to do testing at every phase for everything from bacterial contamination to microbial contamination, et cetera. So I would say testing, we assumed it would be done by the supply chain. And we've learned over the last couple of years that if we truly want to know, we have to do it ourselves. So I would say, if you're dealing with large suppliers, large industrial suppliers, then I would say you can rely, and they usually can produce the data, albeit sometimes grudgingly. With the smaller, more farmer-like suppliers, I think the assumption has to be that if you want that degree of quality, you're on your own. You have to do it yourself.
So unfortunately, we've lost Raj, but he has said in answer to that question, we work with our partners in the region, is his response to that question. So I'll move on to the next one. This is an interesting one. Is there a global definition of upcycled? Is anyone here an expert on upcycling and want to? Barbara, go for it.
Her many times, and I don't know of any definition, just like I don't know of a standardized calculation for carbon footprint yet. There's so many different agencies that calculate carbon footprint, and we've given the same product to 3 different agencies and gotten 3 widely differing numbers. So for upcycled, I mean, for us personally, it means something that has not been thrown into waste. So for example, coffee grinds from the food industry would be a good example, or ground up seeds from cranberries or other foodstuffs that are then used in a product such as an exfoliant. But that's our definition, and I'm not aware, maybe someone else on the panel is aware of a global definition, but I've never seen one.
Anyone else?
I looked into it as well. We haven't found one either, one definition.
Well, okay, there's obviously a gap in the market and a need there for somebody to come up with one. So watch this space, I guess. We have a question here. How do we keep up with all of the certifications required when the cost to apply is so high? Now, obviously, we can't go around to all of the certifiers and ask them to reduce their costs, but maybe how do you go about finding the right one for what you need? Possibly one of the ingredients companies would be good to answer this one.
I ask on this one. Okay.
Sebastian, go for it.
On this one, I really believe it depends of the what each brand is trying to achieve, what message they're trying to convey to their customer, what they stand for, right? Each brand is defining their own mission, their own brand, obviously, and so that would be for them to understand which certification is going to allow them to really meet this specific commitment that they are trying to convey to their customers. So it's really, what are your customers expecting from you? What are your key mission? And based on that, that will be one way to identify the right certification, I would say. But Lisette, sorry.
No, apologies for interrupting you. I think there are 2 different types of certifications. There are the certifications which are talking around how the ingredients are processed and so forth, like in Cosmos. And I saw there was a question around that in the chat. I think that's not necessarily something all consumers know. I think some of these supply chain certifications like Fair Trade, FFL, Rainforest Alliance, there you really have to look at what fits with the supply chain. What are the risks you're trying to address, and how does it fit? We found with the coconut supply chain and those specific risks that are there around reforestation, getting more trees planted, with the direct trade with the mills, improving the earnings to the farmers and so forth. Their Rainforest Alliance was the one that fit the best. So we look at it very much. One thing is, like Sebastian is saying, looking at what is it we're supplying to the market ingredient-wise. Another thing is what kind of supply chain are we establishing and sustainability initiatives, and how does that fit with a certain certification?
It really just makes sense when you put it that way, absolutely. So I believe we have Rajesh back with us from Actilis, but by audio rather than visual. Rajesh, I have a question for you here, which is how do we communicate our sustainability journeys clearly to the end consumer in a way that avoids greenwashing? So how do you help your clients do that?
So, are you able to hear me?
Hello, Rajesh. We can hear you, and our audience can hear you as well. Go for it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, and sorry about the issue. But
No.
At Actilis, we work really closely. At Actilis, we work really closely with our partners, right? And we have a team within Actilis that follows up with our manufacturers, farmers, and ingredient producers. So as I mentioned, one example, Exargo America, they're our partners in Mexico, right? We require all the certification from them in writing, anywhere from UEBT, which is a sort of biotrade, to fair life and so on, eco-social. So we require all the documentation. Our team evaluates and follow up, all the documentation. Sometimes we visit them in person and ensure that these are like a realistic data that they're providing us. Hence, we take that data, summarize it, and then give feedback to our customers.
And is there a similar process that some of you others use as well? Is there any particular way that you encourage the people who you work with to the end, who are facing the end consumer to be avoid greenwashing? Sebastian, you mentioned greenwashing earlier on. What are your thoughts?
On this one, I mean, what we have developed, depending on which partner we're working with, is either our own way of doing it. Like we use our own, we do our own audit of our suppliers. We have a specific forms, questionnaires that we ask them to fill out, to really making sure that we understand their way of working and that they're aligned with what we expect from them. We have strong partnership. We visit our suppliers, partners several times during the years. So I think it's really developing this strong relationship that really understand, that really help build trust and making sure that you are getting what you're asking. For some other customers who are taking a different approach, where we work with certification partners that are going to help making sure that we are working with the right vendors and so on. So it depends of the type of products and the type of supply chain that we are considering.
And this next one's really a bit of an open question. It's two questions, again, that are quite similar in nature. The future of traceability, where do you see this going? And someone else has asked, how will systems and processes that exist today for traceability evolve in the next 3 to 5 years? So guys, who wants to say where they see the future going for this? Anybody? Can I tempt anybody? Hannah, how do you see the future for traceability changing or evolving?
So I think this kind of links to the second question as well, which is that I think, and also something to add when we talked about kind of manual methods and data. So as I said, really robust data is crucial for traceability, but we strongly believe that producers own their data. So obviously we work very closely with producers around the world. And so it's perhaps not about the future, but I think we also have to keep in mind that when we're talking about data and traceability, we also have to consider issues like data protection and who owns that data. And so for us in particular, it's really important to be aware that producers own that data. So I think for us, it's about kind of considering, as I say, not necessarily at the start of the supply chain, but throughout the supply chain, the digitization of the tracking of traceability, and then being aware of who owns that data and making sure it's kept really safe and secure alongside strengthening traceability for others in the supply chain. If that answers the question a little bit.
Lovely, wonderful. So we need to round up because unfortunately time waits for no man or woman, and we are running out of time. But to round up, I'd love you all to give me maybe a short, snappy, even one word answer to the title question: is traceable the new sustainable for cosmetics? Maybe if we start with you, Raj, on the phone as our first presenter today, what's your answer to that question?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely, it's a must. And as you go on this journey to traceability, our customers will require more and more of that. So I completely agree. And
wonderful. And Lisette?
I think I presented that very much. The traceability is the very, very, very important first step, because otherwise we don't know who we're impacting, what we're impacting, but it doesn't drive impact in itself. But it's an imperative step. You have to know the people and the environment in your supply chain.
Fantastic. And Hannah?
Similar to Lisette, I would say traceability is the first step. It's part of the toolkit for sustainability. It's not everything. It's a holistic system, but it's part of it.
Wonderful. And Barbara, would you agree with that as well?
I agree with that, and I would just say that we need universal standards. So we're going to need to start standardizing across the different standards so that we're all talking the same language.
And Sebastian?
Yeah, I'm going to confirm this is one, it's not replacing, it's one tool that is absolutely required to achieve sustainability. And also we need to find some better common ground, better uniformity within defining how we discuss about traceability. So definitely agree with Barbara.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure that's provided real food for thought for all our viewers here today. Unfortunately, that is all that we have time for. So thank you all so much, our panelists, for all of your insights. To our viewers, it's been really wonderful to get so much engagement from you guys, and apologies if we didn't get around to your specific questions today. As mentioned at the start of the webinar, maybe if you were late to proceedings and missed this and would like to catch up, the webinar will be available on demand. The second webinar in our roundtable series will take place on the 6th of July at the same time as today's, and will be on the topic of mood boosting beauty, the power to make people happier. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner of the console, you can click the sign up button today to make sure that you don't miss out. With that all said, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to all of our speakers. You have been fantastic. And thank you to you all too for watching as well. Goodbye.